Hey Internet, Gordon Young with PC World. Today we have a special treat for you. It is Intel's GM of Mobile Innovation, Josh Newman. He is here to talk about laptops and everything we love about laptops. A lot of cool stuff here. Wait to the very end. We'll ask about Windows 11. I know you want to hear about it, what he can say. But as I first want to tell you, Josh, first, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Gordon. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I will say I'm a desktop person, and for me, the laptop, I love laptops, but the laptop is what I use to get to my desktop. But I will say years and years ago, it was really hard for me to accept because I still love desktop so much that laptops really sell way more than desktops. I haven't looked at the numbers lately, but can you let us know just how big laptops are these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to refer to a couple notes here, so just to make sure I get the numbers right. But no, the laptops have grown significantly in the last year. We shared in our Q1 earnings that our notebook CPU volumes reached an all-time high in Q1. They were up 54% year on year, right? That's just our notebook CPUs. Overall, IDC called the notebook market growth in Q1 at 84% year over year. Right. So huge growth from Q1 2020 to Q1 2021.
Right.
And that's compared to about 6% year on year in the desktop segment in the same time, which is great. I mean, fantastic that desktops were growing too.
Yeah, no, it's good for desktops. It's still, especially for people into their gaming desktops, which is still going very strong. But the vast majority of the world is all about buying laptops. And I just want to remind people that that's why laptops are very important. And as much as people want to be desktop snobs about it, everybody's buying laptops. One thing I think is of very keen interest to me, and I think a lot of people still don't understand, including myself, is Intel's Evo program. I'm going to try to explain to you from what I get, and you can correct me because I know I'm going to be wrong. But it's Evo programs. You will see it as a sticker on a laptop, but it is a laptop that Intel has basically blessed by doing work with the vendor beforehand, and then after it's done to make sure it reaches a whole bunch of metrics that Intel, from its research, believes is what makes consumers happy when they have a laptop.
Yeah,
did I mangle it?
It's a good high level description, but let me break it down a little bit more. So first, if you look at that laptop growth we saw in the last year, we actually expect that's going to persist, but it is driven by multiple factors. There's different types of people who need different things from their laptops, right? So we see, the learn from home needs of students. That's going to drive one type of need or spec for a laptop. There's gamers that are driving demand, which you and your audience know very well. But we saw there's also a type of customer or person who maybe they're buying more of a premium laptop and they're running their lives and their work. It's their livelihood and their fun all on one device. And they need that device to project confidence and style. And so that's where we really wanted to try to understand that person, right? And just like we understand what gamers want, we want to understand what that go-getter wants. And so we embarked a couple of years ago actually to do some research. We started scouring college campuses and independent professionals that were, freelancers and entrepreneurs and realtors, right? The types of people who were doing needed their laptops to help them seamlessly move through all the different things they had to do in their busy lives. And what we found was all that research. By the way, we did the research because we were asking ourselves, after Thin and Light, after 2-in-1s, which was the work of the prior 5 years of innovating in mobile laptops, we wanted to figure out what was the next thing we really needed to go bring the industry together to deliver to. So we looked at that audience as a very specific segmented audience where we could get the insights to figure out where to focus our innovation and focus the OEMs and the rest of the laptop industry to deliver. And we found a couple really interesting things as we talked to all these different people. one thing they said that was really profound was, hey, I have a phone and I use my phone for everything. I don't need my laptop to be a bigger version of my phone. My laptop is where I go to get the really important stuff done, right? When something matters, if it's a critical assignment for work, or even if it's an important text I have to return and I have to think about the response, I might actually go to my laptop so I can type it out and make sure there's no typos. But I need my laptop to be more, I need less anxiety about the battery. And do I have to hunt for an AC outlet in the Starbucks, or do I have to worry about whether I'm connected or not? And I need to also know that if I am using it without the charger, that it's going to be really snappy. It's going to do everything I need it to do, just like when I'm plugged into the wall. Just need it to be smart. I need it to be, get out of my way. And I don't want to have to think about the technology. I want it to just seamlessly enable me and not be in my way. And I want it to like show off my style and my confidence and help me. I have all these things I'm trying to manage. I have I'm really busy. I'm really stressed, but I want my laptop to sort of project that I've got it together. Right. And so those are some of the insights, especially the one about, hey, I go to my laptop to focus to get really important things done, that really inspired us. So we set out to do some specifications, and we built the Project Athena innovation program. And what the idea behind Project Athena was, we take that vision of what the future of the most mobile laptops need to be, and we start setting out annual specifications that we work with the OEMs, we work with battery vendors, we work with display vendors, all the different components and software parts of the laptop to say, how are we going to together get to this end state promise of that future laptop? And so Project Athena, it's investment we make in the industry. It's co-engineering we do with the OEMs to help them design every aspect of these laptops. And then it's what's enabled the Intel Evo brand. So when a laptop comes through the program, it meets the specification, it goes through specific experience testing that addresses some of those pain points that we found in the research. It's got to be responsive when I'm working on battery. It's got to have a long-lasting battery. It's got to turn on in an instant. It's got to have great connectivity. Right. So we test, and we created new experience indicators in addition to the benchmarks to make sure all these laptops meet these standards. And the idea was to raise the bar of what people could expect from those laptops. And that's what makes the Intel Evo branding possible. When it meets all those requirements, it then earns the Intel Evo badge to be able to tell consumers that this is a better experience, an evolved experience for these most mobile laptops. So that was the idea. That's what we were doing with Intel Evo. It started with that, really deep understanding of these people's needs, translate that into technologies that we're going to bring out each year and work with the OEMs and the ecosystem with investments to bring to market. And then be able to communicate it to customers that these are the best, these meet those criteria with the Intel Evo brand.
So I sort of feel like in the old days, you might get something like you say, like, hey, use this kind of panel, or use this model panel, or use this model RAM, or use this RAM timing. Is that the kind of stuff that it's being the laptop vendor is being given a list, like a menu of these are the items which we think will help you get to what the consumer wants? Or is it a little more you sort of let them pick and then you make sure that it meets what your guidelines are for Evo?
It's a really expansive set of requirements. The spec itself is actually, I think at last count, we're at 70 something pages. But the idea behind that is we do have hardware requirements, right? So, minimum CPU, minimum storage, memory requirement, the typical things you might find in a specification. But we go quite a bit further. First, we talk about must be Wi-Fi 6 and must be Thunderbolt 4 for the latest and greatest in anxiety-free connectivity, whether you're talking wired or wireless connectivity. And then we go and say there's some key experience testing that each laptop has to meet. And this is really where the really significant advancement that I believe we've made to assure the experience is there. If you think about the traditional CPU and PC benchmarks, the notion there is it's kind of like a car test track. It's repeatable. The methodology you use is to make sure the laptop is clean, or the PC is clean, and you're running on a clean boot, and there's no other apps running in the background, and you're just trying to see how fast you can make it go, given the hardware configuration. What we were trying to do is actually capture the chaos of typical real world user scenarios, right? You've got 50 tabs open in the background in your Chrome browser, and they're all processing stuff in the background, even though you're not looking at them. And then you're trying to launch a Zoom call while you're trying to share or work on a PowerPoint or Word document. And then you're trying to switch fast to go look something up on your browser. And so we're trying to capture all these interactions from local to cloud and test and make sure the laptops met all those requirements. The hard thing about that is you have the run-to-run variations, you have the chaos of what else might be going on in the network. You have different network latency concerns. So we had to account for all of these things and bring in a lot of statistical methods to go through these types of key experience tests, right? Run them, 30 times, make sure we've got really good statistical convergence. But that's what we developed over time. There's a science behind these key experience indicators that just no one else is doing. But the idea was to tackle the complexities of real world PC usage and then verify all the Intel Evo laptops against that.
Yeah, and I agree with you, because I'm one of those people that I love getting out the benchmark. You build your chart. Bar is longer is better, and the assumption is longer bar better means better performance in practical everyday use, which we assume, but it sounds like Evo gets closer to that chaos of it, which I can tell you is, for a regular person like me, it's really hard to make it repeatable and to test.
Yeah, and this is where it comes back to probably the laptops that are really geared toward these types of users that we're talking about. Which, by the way, when we started the research, it was all about independent professionals and higher ed students. What we found since everybody started working from home is that all the agile workers and remote work scenarios, it's like so much more, those needs are so much more pervasive among so many more laptop users now. So it sort of really reinforced and accelerated our focus on delivering these kinds of experiences. But it's what gets interesting about, does the benchmark translate to real world performance, is once you unplug a thin and light laptop that's form factor constrained, and you want to keep the skin temp down to a certain level, it really adds a bunch of variability into how it can perform. And up until we started the Intel Evo and Project Athena testing program, we saw a lot, wide variation of laptops that all looked the same and had the same processor and memory configuration, but responded very differently under those real world scenarios. And so that was one of the first things we were trying to address with Intel Evo, is to raise the bar of all of those laptops to meet that better experience and to meet the customer's expectations that we were focused on in a much better way, much more consistent way.
And that is a really good point, because one CPU model here in Model Y might not give you the same performance as a CPU in Model X. But I know the OEMs would say, like, well, we did it this way because we've decided we're gonna detune it a little more under battery power because we want to stretch it out even further. Does that sort of take that ability for the vendor to as they always complain to me about, it's like, we know our customer, we want to build for them. Is there still room for that kind of laptop in Evo?
Yeah, so you're getting to differentiation. One of the great things about Windows PCs is the choice. Is we have so many partners, so many system manufacturers that all bring their knowledge of customers and their focus on customers, and we want to continue to embrace that within Intel Evo. So what would have happened before we had the Intel Evo verification program is, system manufacturer A would say, no, I think when I'm on battery, I'm going to turn the performance down so I get another hour of battery life. And customer B or system manufacturer B would go the other way, and you have this variation. What we're coming in to do with the co-engineering, when we put Intel engineers at the OEM, system manufacturer A and system manufacturer B's sites, and we're co-developing the design with them. We're saying, how can we meet your goals and the Intel Evo, and in the Intel Evo goals? How can we understand you want this balance of fan noise and thermal performance, but we also believe we have to have this minimum level of responsiveness and battery life and instant on and connectivity. Let's just solve the problems together. That's what the co-engineering is all about. We're coming up with new thermal technologies, and we're using technology like Intel dynamic tuning technology. We're at the system level, at each individual system level, we're optimizing the design so we can get the and. We like to talk about the and. You can have great battery life and great responsiveness when you're running on battery, right? So that's the idea. We're trying to maintain how the system manufacturers want to approach their customers, but really push with our engineering to also make sure that it's meeting that minimum experience.
I want to ask this before we sort of move on a little bit here, but I think you folks take a little bit of a rap sometimes, sort of pushing the real world feel over the benchmark community, which I am a member of. But how do we get to the understanding that we can still have the benchmark community with a verdict here? But I do argue, I do think, especially on a thin and light laptop, that 90% of people don't care about the silly benchmarks that I run. They only care about, like you said, I have Chrome open with 50 tabs. I've got Outlook. I've got, all these other things running. There must be some way for a benchmark that is easier to run that can simulate this, because it sounds like it's very hard for us to replicate, I guess, is what I'm saying. Is there any way we could get there someday? That's not much of a question.
No. I think that's the objective. I think as an industry, we have to keep getting better at that. But I do think there's a continuum, and all of these have their own value. I think the traditional benchmarks, much like a test track for a car, will still tell you useful information about the configuration that's built, and be able to allow you to do common consistent comparisons between devices or between generations. And so they're important. You go all the way to the other extreme. It's what we're trying to do with Intel Evo, with really trying to capture real world. It's not just driving the car on real roads, but it's all terrains and all weather conditions in any kind of traffic patterns that you can't control. And so we're trying to capture that to say, how does the car feel? And it's one of those things, like, you feel, when it's good, it. And that's what we're really trying to encapsulate with the key experience indicators, is how can we put more engineering and science around making sure that people are going to feel it and know it's good when they're using it in day-to-day scenarios. But the benchmarks are still have a big role in that, because we also want to make sure that at the base, when you open it up on a test track, it's it's still going to be fantastic.
Yeah, and I
don't know if the car analogy resonates with you, but
it does actually. It does help, because knowing how a car does on a track is not the same as knowing how that car does sitting in bumper to bumper traffic for 3 hours, right? So yeah. I'm kind of interested in the bumper to bumper. I think probably a lot of people would be way more interested in 65 miles an hour driving down I-5, kind of, rather than flat out most of the time. So.
Yeah, well, we should all be so lucky for the traffic on I-5 to allow for that.
Yeah. Now about the co-engineering. Now, so that means Intel engineering, you basically providing more engineers to a certain company to work on a laptop design, or being involved from when it's only at the end?
Yeah, no, that's a lot of people don't realize how many system engineers Intel has that actually work with the system manufacturers. We have a significant investment in the system engineering. We develop thermal technologies. We develop board technologies. We actually have design. We have the first design teams on new Intel processors are the Intel teams that are building depending on the segment. They're either building the smallest possible motherboard, or they're actually designing reference designs for desktops and gaming desktops. But a lot of that then fuels what the industry does, what the system manufacturers can do. So we're providing all that reference material. So that's one aspect of it. But the other one is we have customer engineers that are also deep hardware and firmware designers that we put on each individual system manufacturer program. So as they have a new project, they say, hey, I want to do a next generation 14-inch super thin laptop. I have these technical challenges, A, B, and C. I don't know how to do the thermals yet. I don't know how to solve for this display. It's 2 years from now on your future processor. So we'll go put, if it's exciting innovation, it's the right innovation, we'll go put significant Intel engineers on it, basically on the design team with the customer to go solve those problems, to go invent the technologies and go work with the component ecosystem. And if we need a different kind of panel driver, a timing controller to drive the panel, or a new kind of touch controller, or whole new thermal technology to enable, high performance in a really thin chassis while keeping the outside really cool. So it's a lot of Intel engineers that are actually deeply involved on these designs from the time that they're spec'd out by our customer to deliver it to market.
And obviously, this would benefit Intel because the first laptops would be based on a co-engineered design. Does it mean they can't use like the same shell or cooling for any other laptops, or does that mean it's only in that laptop?
It depends on the specificity of the technology. Often, what the investment goes to is improves the entire PC ecosystem. If you look at the Ultrabook program that we kicked off about 10 years ago, all right, that was the whole goal, was to take laptops that were typically greater than an inch thick, so 25 to 35 millimeters thick, and get them to be 15 to 20 millimeters thick. So really getting below 20 millimeters. And when we started Ultrabook, it was a really challenging program to get the thermal technologies and the materials and the chassis tooling and everything else to fit and get the performance running at the level that it needed to be running at. And then we added the awesome but complex technologies of 360-degree hinges to do 2-in-1s. And when you flip a performing laptop into tablet mode, the thermal profile that you have to cool and still perform changes completely because the airflow changes. So we had to solve for those kinds of things. But by doing all that, we certainly did them first on Intel designs, but you saw the whole industry, the whole PC market benefited from that, those investments we made. And so, we believe that this is something we have to do, that only Intel can do this. And it really is for the good of the whole PC industry and and its customers.
Next one I want to ask about is something that I was very excited about. And frankly, I'm going to be honest, I think has very little chance of going anywhere. And that is a company called Framework. Their whole idea, I will explain it. I know you're familiar with it, but I will explain it to the audience. It is a completely upgradable, serviceable laptop. You can buy a new motherboard. You can change the ports. 3 years down the road, you can buy a new motherboard, swap it out. And the whole idea is to make a laptop a lot more sustainable, in my view, because laptops generally have turned into, you use it until its lifespan is over and you get rid of it. But the whole idea of Framework, where you could possibly get the same service life out of it as what we see out of a desktop, which is near infinite now, is really appealing to me. But I also know consumers, they don't really buy it. They don't like it. But what do you think of this? Do you think the laptop, one, has become more sustainable, and two, do you think this, is it going to even work? Or would a consumer buy a slightly heavier, bigger laptop for it to be more serviceable?
I think what Framework's doing is really compelling, really exciting, and so and it's probably a bit of a long game, right, on it. But we absolutely believe the laptop should be more sustainable. Right, it's part of Intel's RISE goals. Driving sustainability into our products is a key focus for us, and we kind of look at that in three. I would put it in kind of three buckets. One is just the Energy Star and EP, and reducing the power burden of just running a performant laptop over time. right? That we can significantly reduce the impact on the grid just by making all laptops more power efficient while still delivering the performance, to do what people want to do with them. So that's one. The other one, working with a lot of the customers, a lot of the system manufacturers now, and along with some of the help we're giving them, are adopting some practices around using things like ocean-bound plastics or other sustainable materials in their laptop manufacturing processes. And so how can we help accelerate those things working with the industry? And then the third one, which is pretty extreme, but love the idea. We're putting a lot of work into it on our 11th gen core platform with Framework, which it's new. But the whole idea is build a mechanical design that allows for that swappability of components, but also to build a whole ecosystem and a marketplace around creating the components so that people can customize and replace and reuse longer. And that's the really exciting part. If they can, find us, start, with initial customers and grow over time, I think there are people who are pretty passionate about new kinds of sustainable approaches and are willing to early adopt and then let that marketplace and that ecosystem grow and build up. I love what Framework's doing, and really excited to be working with them to go help them make that, and really rooting for its success. But yeah, I think it's early, and it's probably a long game. So I hope we see more innovation along that line, and we're going to be happy to go support it and help make it happen where we can.
Do you think? I mean, they're doing their own sort of custom designs now. Do you think it has to sort of follow how the template of the desktop, whereas we have, industry standard designs for motherboards? As you were saying, it would help if you have an ecosystem, but you can't really do that without standards. Should Intel or somebody drive a standard and say, here's a standard motherboard size dimension, and you build this and it'll fit into these shells? You sort of try to do that with some of the compute products, I think.
Yeah. It's definitely an interesting thought. I think where one of the things as we look at driving next level of meeting customer needs with style and thin, it really does drive for mass customization of the motherboard in a laptop, right? How can you make it as small as possible? How can you make it fit the exact space that tooling has in that chassis, so that you can also get the right battery size and be able to route your 5G antennas, right? So most laptop innovation is focused on that. And so it does lend itself to a much deeper focused customization per design. So thinking through if Framework's able to standardize for their specification, how we might be able to build on that with them in the future. That's something that it may help. It may help. I don't have the definitive answer today for it, but we're gonna work with them and see how we can help accelerate, as they build their customer base and start to learn more about how to really, get people excited about it. And I think the why of what they're doing is really the important thing. And customers who are just want to be buying the most sustainable products they can, I think it's pretty exciting. But maybe there's still some technical work and technologies that we still have to think up for how to make that more achievable.
One other thing I'm gonna veer off into a little bit away from some hardware, and that is AI. That Intel has been, of course, that's in Tiger Lake and as well as in Ice Lake CPUs. Where exactly are we going with AI as far as your laptops go? Because I think a lot of people think like this doesn't make a lot of sense in a laptop, but can you convince me that it is a worthy goal?
I think I can. I think the possibilities for AI in the laptop are, huge. We have with the 11th gen core, we talked about, our XPU approach to the architecture and our CPU, our Iris Xe graphics GPU, but also we have a Gaussian neural noise accelerator for doing things like removing background noise from video calls at really low power. We have new instructions that are specifically targeted at AI. So we have a lot of different things that are built into our current products that are geared toward accelerating and making AI run better on the laptop. Now, AI for AI's sake isn't exciting, but what you do with it is the important thing. And so as we look to the future of how we're trying to drive next generation Intel Evo laptops. Some of the things we're looking at is how do we make the whole video collaboration experience better? Obviously, in the last year, it's become one of the most important applications we all do on our laptops now. And so how can I do face framing? How can I do background noise removal? Like something just crashed in the background of my noise. I don't have background noise removal on. How can I do things like the background blur at lower power and do it in a way where it's much better? So as if I move around, you don't see that kind of halo following me. Those things are compute intensive. But if you can use AI algorithms and you have the right low power engines in the laptop, you can, two things will happen. That quality of that experience will be better. It also won't be taking as much CPU time away from the other applications you're trying to run in parallel, back to that real world chaos. And then if you're doing it on battery, it won't drain the battery as fast. Because today, if you turn background blur on Zoom or Teams and you're running on battery, it's going to accelerate your battery rundown, right? But AI, with the right AI engines, right, we can make that experience better, and we can do it in lower power or lower performance footprint, if you will, so that you can also have all your other applications running. So that's one key area for AI that I see on the laptop. I think the other one is, if I go back to our original why of Evo and about enriching the lives of people who are doing multiple things. They're moving from, the meeting with the client at the coffee shop, if they're a realtor, to going to their daughter's PTA meeting to go, log minutes, to, going home and, supporting your hobby, right? Maybe they are learning guitar like I constantly am. And as you move through different phases, you have just different needs from the laptop at different points in the day. And so how can the laptop creatively assist you as you move into those different roles and say, hey, I think this is the desktop with these files you probably want handy right now, as opposed to having to click 12 times to set up your context. I see you got the guitar out, this is probably what you want now. And how do I minimize those kind of interactions for trying to change my state, if you will? And so AI can play a powerful role in that kind of thing. So those are some of the things as we imagine if your laptop could do this for you. Imagine if you can have to click your mouse 12 less times while you're trying to get ready for a big presentation, where those are really impactful things from our research. We're really excited about the possibility for AI, and the engines we're building into the platform can deliver great value.
Okay. And then, of course,
did I convince you? How'd I do?
Pretty good. And there's also the cool Photoshop stuff too. So that's always neat. And then the application.
Yeah, absolutely. For anybody who's doing any kind of digital creation, the implications of AI for video editing, photo editing, 3D creation. That's another big area of professional 3D creation. There's so many powerful things that AI can go make faster, can go do more effectively in terms of the output. Right. So that's definitely an area. And it's also, it spans kind of that Evo laptop up to those enthusiast laptops you talked about earlier with Kim.
Yeah. And I think one thing, because often what I'll hear from the internet is they'll say, well, you need to leave this is hard work. You need to leave this to a discrete high TDP, chip. And my argument is, I believe where Intel's going is, if you get this into everybody's hands, you set this base level for developers to go, now I'm going to support it because this is in more and more hands. And it's essentially, if, you have that large user base, they can do it in an economic, they're not wasting developer money on something that only a few people have. So.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. I think the other part of it is that the usages themselves, what you do with the AI will vary for the different segments. Like we talked about, the diverse people's needs, different people need different things from their laptops. And so there's going to be different things you can do with AI that will, different segments. So if I think about, for that really professional creator doing 3D creation, there's a lot of things that AI will be useful for. For somebody who is like that independent professional working at the coffee shop a lot, once, as we're opening up again in the US, right? One of the things we found from the research is they really like to protect their work when they're doing work in progress. They don't like other people looking at their laptop. If they're on a plane or they're at a coffee shop, they're very nervous about that. And so one of the cool AI functions that we've been developing with some of our customers and is in the market already through the Intel Visual Sensing Controller, which is another chip that we've put on into some laptops, is the idea that the laptop can know if you have somebody looking behind you over your shoulder, and then it can decide to fade out the work. So you know that, whether it's for security reasons or just privacy, because you don't want the person to see your unfinished work, it can automatically help give you that confidence, that anxiety reduction, that the laptop is helping you because it's aware of what's going on around you. And so that's a different application, but it's still powered by AI, and it'll be a different set of accelerators and different power levels to go achieve the delightful experience there. And so that's how we're thinking about it. But we just see tons of opportunity.
So if somebody's peeking over your shoulder at your laptop, it'll blur it out, or just
that's the idea. The idea is it's detecting onlookers, right? And then it can automatically say, "Oh, that's not your head." It could give you a little warning. It can blur the screen. It can, whatever that would be the idea. It's hard. It's a lot of processing that has to go on to give the computer that kind of intelligence, right? To be able to discern that. And by the way, not have it be annoying, because you don't want it to accidentally trip. When you're trying to do work and it's just you and you move your head and it goes, "Oh, you can't look at your work anymore."
Right. And so by offloading it onto a different processor, you again minimize battery life. So
you minimize the battery life, and you minimize the burden on the rest of the system, so you can have the processing focus on the real work you're trying to get done.
Cool. And the last topic, as I promised, we wanted to get into, although I do want to point out for people who don't know, a lot of people are unable to say they can't answer all of our questions yet in Windows 11. There's a lot of questions, a lot of talk about it, but so Josh, what can you say about Windows 11 at this point where you don't get, ruffle any feathers?
Well, I think the one thing I'd say is we're excited about it. I think what we saw in the announcement last week in terms of the innovations, at the time when the PC is just becoming so much, reestablishing importance in people's lives for many different reasons. Just really excited about the innovation that Microsoft has put into Windows 11, and it's a lot of it's a product of the work that Intel and Microsoft have done together for years, and so this is just a continuation of that. And we think the best Windows 11 experiences are going to be on 11th Gen Intel Core and especially Evo devices for the most mobile. Beyond that, we're excited about how we're working together to get support on various platforms. We know we're going to keep working with Microsoft as we get up to launch to and making sure we have the right platform supported, our right drivers, right firmware, everything else we do together. But yeah, I mean, it represents, just like we've been investing big to the next level of innovation on PCs, we see that Windows 11 is doing the same. I think really excited about the work, their announcement to bring the Android apps to the Windows Store and, leveraging our Intel Bridge technology to do that. I think that opens up new possibilities for customers using Windows laptops and desktops. So just overall, some really, really exciting new innovations with Windows 11.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Intel Bridge technology? Because that was sort of like, I hadn't heard about that until the announcement. What is can you say what it does yet, or too early?
It's probably a little too early. I mean, it's a runtime compiler technology that we've had that allow, Android apps that were programmed for a different architecture to basically run natively on x86. And so that's going to open up, with what Microsoft announced, that's going to open up for Windows PC customers the ability to run a lot of their favorite Android apps and have that continuous experience from phone to PC that we're finding people really want.
Okay. But it would be, the bridge technology would be different than what we see out of emulators that a lot of people run right now for Android apps on PC.
Yeah, it's a unique approach to creating a whole emulation environment to run it within.
Okay. And the end result would be better performance or better experience for the consumer, right?
Yes, that's absolutely the goal, and how as we work on that with Microsoft and others that are using it. So probably something we could certainly follow up with your audience in the future on.
Yeah. I think there's a tremendous amount of interest that, whenever there's a new operating system launch, people get really super excited about it. So, it'll be good for everybody to just talk about everything. So it's good for the PC period.
Yeah, no, very, very, to said it again, we're really excited about it. And it's important. I think it's what we see people want, both Microsoft and us acknowledge that's something people want. They want some continuity from phone to PC. And it's just like going back to our original research. The continuity is important. People don't want their PC to be bigger versions of their phones. They need their PC to be their PC, but they still like having some of that continuity of moving between them with similar apps, similar experiences.
Thanks for being here, Josh. Good info. And again, let's just this year and next year, we're going to be seeing, sounds like, some pretty cool designs.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We're excited to bring out the next wave. We're always sort of inspired by what our partners are doing. It's just a lot of fun to see how, different innovations really getting, different customers excited about what they can now do with their laptops. And that's what's going to keep us going, and where we focus on with Project Athena and Intel Evo, as well as where we focus in the gaming space with our H series processors. And it's great to be able to talk to you all about that today, talk to you and your audience about that. So thanks for the time.